ॐ विश्वन्दर्पण दृश्यमान नगरी तुल्यन्निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिरिवोद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यः साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयं तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तन्तोटकं वातिककारमन्यान् अस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततमानतोऽस्मि श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः परब्रह्मनिष्ठं स्वतो धर्मनिष्ठम् अहिंसैकनिष्ठं स्वशिष्यैः सुजुष्टं यतीनां वरिष्ठं गुरूणां गरिष्ठं दयानन्दरूपं मदाचार्यमीडे नमः श्री परमार्थाय संसाराध्यासनाशिने श्रोत्रिय ब्रह्मनिष्ठाय तस्मै ब्रह्मविदे नमः सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् तपोभिः क्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्षोऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते. I welcome you all to the 25th class of the Ātma Bodha series. We will read verses 60 to 64 that we had completed in the last class and then proceed from there. Ananvasthulamahrasvam
Ananvasthulamahrasvam
Adīgham
Adīrgham
Arupa Gunavarnākhyam
Arupa Gunavarnākhyam
Tadbrahmetyavadhārayet
Tadbrahmetyavadhārayet
Yadbhāsā bhāsyaterkādī
Yadbhāsā bhāsyaterkādī
Bhāsyairyatthu na bhāsyate
Bhāsyairyatthu na bhāsyate
Yena sarvamidam bhāti
Yena sarvamidam bhāti
Tadbrahmetyavadhārayet
Tadbrahmetyavadhārayet
Swayam antarbahirvyāpya
Swayamantarbahirvyāpya
Bhāsayannakhilam jagat
Bhāsayannakhilam jagat
Brahma prakāshate vanni
Brahma prakāshate vanni
Prataptāya sapindavat
Prataptāya sapindavat
Jagat vilakshanam Brahma
Jagat vilakshanam Brahma
Brahmanonyanna kinchana
Brahmanonyanna kinchana
Brahmanyat bhati chen mithya
Brahmanyat bhati chen mithya
Yatha marumarichika
Yatha marumarichika
Drishyate shruyate yadyat
Drishyate shruyate yadyat
Brahmanonyanna tad bhavet
ब्रह्मणोऽन्यन्न तद्भवेत्
तत्त्वज्ञानाच्च तद्ब्रह्म
तत्त्वज्ञानाच्च तद्ब्रह्म
सच्चिदानन्दमद्वयम्.
सच्चिदानन्दमद्वयम्.
In these verses, Bhagavad is pointing out the nature of Brahman and the glory of Brahman. And in the process, Bhagavad refers to various Upanishad mantras to make a point that the teaching in the Ātma Bodha is not different from the teaching of the Upanishads. It is flowing down from the teaching of the Upanishads. So in verse 60, Ananva sthulamahhrasvam adibgham ajamavyayam. Here, Bhagavad is saying that Brahman is not small, nor large, nor short, nor long. What Bhagavad is highlighting is that all of these adjectives that we use in our day-to-day lives, they all correspond to some Nama-rupas. They are all related to Nama-rupas. Whereas the Upanishad says, Anoho Aniyan Mahato Mahiyan, meaning that it is smaller than the smallest, Anoho Aniyan, and Mahato Mahiyan, it is larger than the largest. So whatever smallest thing we can conceive of, let us say there's a quark, which is the smallest particle that physicists have discovered. Then Brahman pervades even the smallest particle. And similarly, you take the largest thing that we can think of, the largest galaxy, the Milky Way, for example. Or there are galaxies 100 times bigger than the Milky Way, perhaps. You think of any such galaxy, Brahman pervades that also. Brahman is the very content of the smallest thing we can think of and the content of the largest thing that we can think of. And therefore, Brahman cannot be categorized by sizes. Brahman has no size at all, really speaking. It is not spatially limited at all. That's what it means. And then Ātma Bodha points out Ajam Avyayam. So Brahman is not born either, meaning it doesn't have a beginning in time. Nor does it have an end in time. Avyayam, meaning it has no decay, no end. Because Brahman was there before the entire Srishti came into being. And Brahman remains after Pralayam also. So Brahman has no boundary in time also. It is not time-wise limited. And Arupa Guna Varnakhyam, meaning that it has no name, no form, no attribute. Whatever attributes we associate with objects, those are not there in Brahman at all. So Ātma Bodha is pointing out the reason why Brahman is not available for the Laukika Pramanas, because all these Laukika Pramanas are dependent upon Pratyaksha. And Pratyaksha is dependent upon the object being attributed. Therefore, Brahman is not accessible to any of the Laukika Pramanas. Then how do I know that it even exists? Where Bhagavad says, Yad bhasa bhasyater kadi bhasyair yattu na bhasyate yena sarvamidam bhati. As we saw, this is again taken from the Upanishad mantras in Mundaka Upanishad and in Kathopanishad. So we saw that in Vedanta, the word light or jyoti is used in a technical sense. Any principle in the presence of which things are known and in the absence of which things are not known is termed as light or jyoti. And therefore, Suryaha, Chandraha, Tarakam, Vidyut, Agnihi, all of these qualify as lights. But then we say that even the sense organs qualify as lights because in the presence of sense organs, the world is known. In the absence of sense organs, that part of the world is not known. For a blind person, the world of forms and colors is absent. Therefore, sense organs can also be called lights. But then the sense organs have to be backed by the mind. Because only in the presence of the mind, the sense organs, whatever the sense organs reveal, that is registered as knowledge. And therefore, even mind is a light. Even the mind is a light. But then the Upanishad comes to the ultimate light, the light of Atma, the light of consciousness. Because only in the presence of Atma, the mind and the sense organs and all the other luminaries, they can function as lights. Therefore, consciousness or Atma is the ultimate light. And just as in the physical world, we see that the light in the physical world, it illuminates everything. But the light itself is not illumined by anything. The light is self-revealing. It cannot be illuminated by anything else, and it need not be illuminated by anything else because it is self-revealing. So similarly, Atma or consciousness, it need not be illuminated by anything else. First of all, it cannot be illuminated by anything else because everything else is jadam. It doesn't possess any inherent consciousness. So you don't need a second consciousness to illuminate this consciousness. The consciousness, Atma, cannot be illuminated by any of these other luminaries. Starting from the sun, moon, stars, with lightning, fire, sense organs, mind. The Atma cannot be illuminated by any of these, but the Atma need not be illuminated by any of these because the Atma is self-revealing. So as we say, when we say self-revealing, we mean that we don't need any pramana for me to know that the Atma exists. I know that I am without any pramana, without using any pramana. I am the one that employs all the pramanas to know everything else. But I don't need any pramana to know that I am. So this is what we mean by the self-evidence of Atma, the self-revealing nature of Atma. And then Bhagavad points out, Yena sarvamidam bhati. So the credit for illumining the whole world, whom should it go to? That's the question. Well, we saw that the sun illumines the moon and the moon illumines the earth. Now, who should the credit go to for illumining the earth on a dark night when just the moon is there? We say that really speaking, the credit should go to the sun because it is the light of the sun that descends on the moon and then illumines the earth. So similarly, we say that the credit for illuminating this whole world should go to the ultimate light, which is Atma. Because only in the presence of Atma, the mind and the sense organs, they get this borrowed consciousness. Just like the moon gets this borrowed light from the sun, similarly, the mind and the sense organs get this borrowed consciousness. And it is with this borrowed consciousness that they illuminate the entire world. Therefore, the credit for this illumination should go to the Atma, Yena Sarvamidam Bhati. And in the next verse, Bhagavad points out that in the physical world, whenever a person knows something, then he knows there are two things involved. When I see an object, I know that the object has been pervaded by light. Only because of the pervasion of light that the object is known. Even if I am reading a book, then every letter has to be pervaded by light for that letter to be known. If a section of the book is in a shadow, if enough light is not falling on it, then I cannot know that. Even if I strain my eyes, I have to move it in such a way that it comes under some light. So anything that is known in the physical world has to be pervaded by light. So similarly, anything that is known has to be pervaded by the light of consciousness. Without that, that particular thing cannot be known. So the book shines because it is pervaded by light. But the light itself is known because light is self-revealing. Similarly, every object here is known because it is pervaded by consciousness. And the consciousness itself is known not because it is pervaded by something else, but because it is self-revealing. Then, if we look at our internal world, so here Bhagavad says, Swayam antar bahir vyapya bhasayan akhilan jagat. So antar bahir vyapya. So if we look at our internal world, then in the internal world there is lots of objects that I know. And when we say objects, these are the conditions of the state of the three bodies. Of course, the Karana Sharira is avyakta, so we can leave aside the Karana Sharira. But this condition of the Sthula and Sukshma Sharira, these are the objects of my internal knowledge, like my hunger, thirst, emotions, decisions, happiness or sadness. And we are moving from across the various koshas, the conditions of the various koshas. All my memories, my beliefs, my knowledge, all of these internal conditions are also known to me. And therefore, I have to understand that just like any external object is known to me only when it's pervaded by light, is seen by me only when it's pervaded by light, similarly, even these internal conditions are known to me because they have been pervaded by consciousness. So, antar bahir vyapya, it pervades the entire internal world and makes it known. And similarly, any object outside cannot make itself known unless it is contacted by a mind. The thought in the mind has to go out and pervade the object, and when the thought pervades the object, the reflected consciousness carried by the thought also pervades the object and makes the object known, illumines the object. And therefore, any external object that is known is also pervaded by consciousness. So, Swayam antar bahir vyapya bhasayan akhilan jagat. And Brahma prakashate vanni prataptaya sa pindavat. So here Bhagavad gives the example that if we see a red hot iron ball, then the red hot iron ball is glowing. It glows and it burns. Now I don't see the fire separately. But what is my understanding? My understanding is that it glows, it burns because it is pervaded by an independent principle which is fire. Fire is an independent principle. It's not a part, product, or property of the iron ball. It's an independent principle that pervades the iron ball and makes it glow. So similarly here as well, I know this internal world and I know the external world. But then these are known, these appear, these shine in my consciousness because they have been pervaded by an independent principle, which is consciousness. Consciousness is not a part, product, or property of any body, mind, or any object. Consciousness is an independent principle that pervades all body, mind, and all known objects. Therefore, here Bhagavad says, Prataptayasa pindavat, like this red hot iron ball example. Then in the next two verses, Jagat Vilakshanam Brahma, Brahmanonyanna Kinchana. Bhagavad is reminding us of Vedantic algebra. In the normal mathematics algebra, we say if A is B, then B is A. If A equals B, B equals A. There is probably some special mathematical term for this. If I recall right, it may be called commutativity or something of that sort. Anyway, when we come to Vedanta, this particular algebra doesn't hold in Vedanta. Like we said, the beggar is the actor in a particular costume, but the actor is not the beggar. B is A, but A is not B. The beggar is clearly the actor appearing in a particular costume. So the beggar is the actor. But the actor is not the beggar because the actor can drop the costume. In the green room, the actor drops the costume and continues to be the actor. And then the actor can also put on another costume, an entirely different costume. That has nothing to do with the beggar's costume. So the actor is not the beggar. So similarly, gold is not the ornament. Gold is never any particular ornament. But every ornament is gold. The clay is not the pot, but the pot is clay. The ornament doesn't have an independent existence apart from gold. The ornament is just gold appearing in a particular name and form. Similarly, the pot doesn't have an independent existence apart from clay. The pot is just clay appearing in a particular name and form. So clay is not the pot is clay. Similarly, Brahman is not the world, but the world is Brahman. That's what he's saying here. Jagat vilakshanam Brahma, Brahmanaha anyat na kinchana. And Brahmanyat bhati chet mithya. So if I know the adhishthanam of anything, if I know the adhishthanam, for example, if I know the clay, then I know that there is really only the clay. The pot is just a namarupa of clay. But if I don't know the adhisthana, and I know only the pot, then I have known only something that is the mithya. I have known something that is not really there. The pot is not really there. So without knowing the adhishthanam, if I know something, then whatever I have known is not really there. That's why Brahmanyat bhati chet mithya. If you have known something other than Brahman, whatever you have known is mithya only. Yatha maru marichika. In the desert, I see some mirage. I see a mirage. I take it as long as I know this, know the sand, the adhishthanam, that there is really the sand, then I have known the satyam. I have known what is really there. But if I have known only the mirage water, without knowing that what is really there is the sand, then whatever I have known is not really there. What I have known is not the satyam, it is only an appearance. And drishyate, shruyate yat yat brahmanonyanna tat bhavet. Whatever is seen, heard, smelt, tasted, touched, this entire perceived world, it does not really have, it doesn't have an independent existence apart from Brahman. Brahman is the adhishthanam. Really speaking, there is only Brahman. Like we said, looking at a pot, the Jnānī and the Ajñānī, their vision is different. The Jnānī sees only the clay, whereas the Ajñānī sees only the pot. So really speaking, there is one thing, which is really the clay. The Jnāni's vision is the right vision. The Ajñāni's vision is not the right vision. So the Jnāni has to now teach the Ajñāni. The Jnāni doesn't have this idea of clay at all in his mind. He's seeing only the pot. He's talking about only the pot, pot, pot. So if the Jnānī suddenly tells him that everything is just the clay alone, he doesn't understand what is going on. And therefore, for the time being, the Jnānī accommodates the Ajñānī's vision. He says, okay, so you see the pot. Yes. But there is also the clay. So he brings in the clay as an also. He says, you see the pot. Okay, we also have this thing known as the clay. So now the Jnānī is talking about two things when really speaking there is one thing, and the Jnānī knows that this pot is not really there. But if he has to communicate with the Ajñānī, if his mind has to build a bridge to the Ajñānī's mind, if there has to be a bridge, if there has to be communication, then he has to temporarily, provisionally accept the Ajñānī's vision and then proceed from there. And therefore the Jnānī says that the pot is there, the clay is also there. And then the Jnānī talks about the clay Jnānī. The clay Jnānī talks about clay being the cause and the pot being the effect. Then says that clay is the srishti, sthiti, laya karanam of the pot. Pot is the karyam, pot is the effect. The pot emerges from clay, the pot is sustained by clay, and the pot goes back into clay. But after all of these gymnastics, what does the clay Jnānī finally tell? Tell the student. He tells him that there is only the clay. The pot is not really there at all. So similarly, here too, there is only one thing, which is Brahman. The Jnānī sees only Brahman. He doesn't see a real world at all. The world is mithya. Only Namarupas. But then the Ajñānī who doesn't see Brahman, he sees only the world. So now this Jnānī has to teach the Ajñānī, he has to build a bridge from his mind to the Ajñānī's mind. And therefore he provisionally accepts that there is the world. And then he says, but there is also Brahman that you have not known so far. There is Brahman also. And then he talks about Brahman being the Karanam, being the cause, and the world being an effect. He talks about Brahman being the Srishti, Sthiti, Laya Karanam, that this world emerges from Brahman, this world is sustained by Brahman, and this world goes back into Brahman. But then finally, the Jnānī tells him that there is only Brahman. Because in any system, really speaking, the material cause alone is. In the world of pots, the clay alone is. In this world, Brahman is the ultimate material cause. Brahman alone is. The world is not really there at all. And therefore, Tattvajnanat Tat Brahma, whatever was seen by the world, by the Ajñānī to be the world, that same thing is now understood to be Brahman. Just as whatever was seen as being the pot, that is understood as being clay. So similarly, there is Brahman alone, Satchidanandam Advayam. There is no second thing other than Brahman at all, other than this Satchidananda Brahma. There is no second thing at all. So what has changed? Has anything changed? Did the pot or the clay change? Once one becomes a clay Jnānī, it is just a change in one's vision. The change is purely in one's vision. There is no other change at all. Similarly, here too, the change is purely in one's vision. How one understands the whole thing, how one looks at the whole thing, that alone has changed. We'll go to the next verse, which is continuing on the same theme. Sarvagam Satchidatmanam
Sarvagam Satchidatmanam
Jnānachakshurnirekṣate.
ज्ञानचक्षुर्निरीक्षते
Ajñānachakshurnekṣeta.
अज्ञानचक्षुः नेक्षेत
Bhasvantam bhanumandhavat.
भास्वन्तं भानुमन्धवत्.
So Bhagavad here is reiterating the fact that the change is purely in one's vision alone, in the drishti alone. So Bhagavad is contrasting the vision of the Jnānī and the vision of the Ajñānī. So the change is purely internal because how one looks at a thing, it depends on whether there is ignorance, whether there is superimposition. If there is ajnanam and superimposition, then whatever one sees is not the reality. Whereas, if one has to see the reality, then the ajnanam and the adhyasa have to go. And therefore, this wrong vision has to become the right vision through knowledge. But it is not always necessary that the wrong vision changes to the right vision. The wrong vision can also change to another wrong vision. For example, suppose we can take the example of the rope snake itself. If somebody is in semi-darkness, seeing the rope as a snake, and then he does some prodding. He does some prodding and sees that there is no movement. So he says, "Oh, this is not a snake; it is just a garland." So he has still not understood the reality. But he moved from one superimposition to another superimposition. But the transformation that Vedanta is talking about here is not like that. It is not moving from one adhyasa to another adhyasa, but it is moving from the adhyasa to the very adhishthanam. So it is moving from the wrong knowledge to the final right knowledge. There is no other wrong knowledge here involved. Although it is quite possible that in the study of Vedanta, the student may move from one adhyasa to another. One may think that I have understood Brahman. But whatever he has understood as Brahman could be a superimposition of some sort. That is subsequently corrected. So there are such possibilities also. But here, Bhagavad is contrasting the vision of an Ajñānī who has wrong knowledge and a Jnānī who has the final, ultimate right knowledge. So Bhagavad says, Nidikshate. You have in the last part of the second quarter, Nirikshate means he ascertains, he recognizes intimately, closely, he ascertains. Who ascertains? Bhagavad says, Jnāna chakshuhu nirikshate. Jnāna chakshuhu nirikshate. So Jnāna chakshuhu is really referring to the Jnānī. Jnanam eva chakshuhu yasya. One whose vision, one whose sight, one whose eye is knowledge. Jnanam eva chakshuhu yasya. Or Jnanamayam chakshuhu yasya, meaning ones whose eyes are backed by knowledge. Or Jnanena unmilitam chakshuhu yasya, one's eyes have been opened by knowledge. Is Jnana chakshuhu. So such a person who has this right vision, right perception, he ascertains Jnana chakshuhu nirikshate. And how does he ascertain? Using the appropriate pramana. Using the appropriate means of knowledge, he has ascertained something. And what has he ascertained? Satchidatmanam. Jnāna-chakshuhu Satchidatmanam Nirikshate. He has ascertained that Satchidatma alone is. All this, whatever I am seeing, is Satchidatma. Atma, what is Atma? Atma is nothing but the real meaning of the word I. So whatever is here is I. I alone am. I, the Atma, being one with Brahman, alone am. That is what he has asserted. And the world is an appearance. So there is a famous quote here. It says, Drishtim Jnanamayim Kritva Pashyet Brahmamayan Jagat. Drishtim Jnanamayim Kritva Pashyet Brahmamayan Jagat. So if you make your drishti, the one who makes his drishti, his vision, Jnanamayim, meaning one whose vision is backed by knowledge. Drishtim Jnanamayim Kritva, having altered one's vision so that it is backed by knowledge, what does he see? Pashyet Brahmamayan Jagata. He sees that all this is Brahman alone. As we have seen, Brahman can be known only in one way, as Aham Brahmasmi, as Brahman, that Brahman I am. And therefore he sees that I, the Atma, as Brahman, alone am. So the question is then, what is this world? If I alone am, what is this world that I am seeing here? So just as in case of the pot, it is not that the pot is not seen after one becomes a clay Jnānī. The pot is also seen. But then one understands that the pot is just Nama Rupa of clay. So one can argue that, why are you insisting that the pot is not there? Because the pot is experienced. The pot has experienceability. The pot has transactability. The pot can be touched. The pot is seen. The pot can be touched. And the pot is useful also because the pot can be used to carry water that clay cannot do. So the pot has got experienceability, the pot has got transactability, the pot has got utility. The Jnānī acknowledges all this. The Jnānī also sees the pot. The Jnānī can also touch the pot. The Jnānī also may use the pot. He may use the pot for drinking water. But even as he is drinking water, he says the pot is not there. Pot is not really, because the pot is not really there. What is there is really the clay alone. He knows this very clearly. So experienceability, transactability, and utility is not the proof of reality. Because the pot has all of this. The pot is not real. So similarly, the world is experienced. The world is transactable. The world is also useful. But the fact that the world has got experienceability, transactability, and utility is not proof of its reality. What is here is only Brahman. So, Satchidatmanam, Jnāna-chakshuhu Satchidatmanam Nirikshate. Then what type of Atma is this? Satchidatmanam. What type of Satchidatmanam? He says, Sarvagam Satchidatmanam, one that is all-pervading, meaning that it has got no limitation in space at all. Because everything here depends upon me for its existence. There is nothing else that is independently existent. Even space doesn't have its own existence. Because space emerges only at the time of Srishti. And therefore, this Atma is Sarvagam. Sarvagam Satchidatmanam Jnāna-chakshuhu Nirikshate. And now he contrasts it with the vision of the Ajñānī. What does the Ajñānī see? Na iksheta. In the second line, Bhagavad Pada says, Ajñāna-chakshuhu neksheta, meaning ajnana chakshuhu na iksheta. So yeah, na iksheta, meaning he doesn't see. Who doesn't see? Ajnana chakshuhu na iksheta. One whose mind, one whose eyes are backed by ignorance. Such a person doesn't see. In fact, it is not that he doesn't see, because doesn't see implies maybe some kind of a will. He cannot see. He cannot see. Na iksheta. Even though Atma is sarvagam, it is all pervading. You can say that maybe if it's a microscopic particle, he cannot see that or something like that. This is not the case. Atma is all pervading. Even though Atma is all pervading, Brahman is all pervading, he cannot see. Na iksheta. So what does he see instead? He sees the triangle. He sees the triangle of the Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara. He doesn't see the Adhishthanam. He doesn't see the substratum of this triangle. He sees only these independent Jivas and this independent Jagat and an Ishvara somewhere. Perhaps the Ishvara is there or may not be there. Depends on whether the Ajñānī is a theistic Ajñānī or an atheistic Ajñānī. There are two types of Ajñānīs that are possible. So he sees this Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara triangle. And he sees that I am the small, mortal, limited being persecuted by this Jagat. I am this Apurna Jiva persecuted by this separate Jagat. And for everything, I have to run to a savior Ishvara. This is the vision of the Ajñānī. So as we have seen, there are all these cases of the blue sky. Blue sky is seen by all of us. The flat earth is seen by all of us. And similarly, the sun rising and setting is also seen by all of us. But then if there is jnanam, if one understands the facts, then one understands that these are not the reality. The reality is something else. But a child who looks at the blue sky, or the child looks at this flat earth, or the child sees the rising sun and the setting sun, the child takes it to be literal. The child takes the superficial appearance literally and takes that to be real. So such is the case with the Ajñānī also. He's seeing the same Jiva and the same Jagat and the same Ishvara that the Jnānī also sees. Just like they see the same thing, both of them see the pot, but their understanding of what is there is entirely different. And therefore the Ajñānī takes the superficial appearances to be the reality. Ajñāna chakshuhu na iksheta. He cannot see the reality. And then Bhagavad gives the example of Bhasvantam Bhanum Andhavat. In the last quarter of this verse, he says, Bhasvantam Bhanum Andhavat. Just like this blind person cannot see the blazing sun. Bhasvantam Bhanum means the bright, blazing sun. This blind person, Andhavat, this blind person cannot see. So if we imagine what the blind person's world is, and let's say he's in a room, then everything is dark for him. And from this room, he now, the blind person and another person who is not blind, both of them go out into the, on an afternoon, on a sunny afternoon, they go out. And suddenly this person is the other person, he's affected by the blazing sun. He squirms and closes his eyes for some time until his eyes gets adjusted to it. Whereas for a blind person, there's no difference. He continues to walk like this. So there is no difference at all. He sees the same darkness even in the presence of the blazing sun. So the reason is that he doesn't have the pramana, the means of knowledge is not there. He doesn't have the chakshuhu, the mamsa chakshuhu, the physical eyes. They are not functioning. Or the physical eyes may be there, but the chakshuhu indriya, which is a part of the sukshma sharira, is obstructed for some reason. Therefore, he cannot see. The pramana is not operational. It is as good as not there. And therefore, he is incapable of gaining the knowledge of colors and forms. Of course, now Elon Musk is talking about ways in which he could make people like this also see by directly somehow inducing some kind of electrical signals in different parts of the brain. So anyway, in that case, he's somehow bypassing the need for this physical organ, and somehow trying to accomplish what this physical organ is accomplishing. So it remains to be seen whether that works in all cases or not. It's certainly an interesting development. But now let us come to Vedanta. This is the example. Bhasvantam bhanumandhavat. So similarly, this ajnana chakshuhu. The ajnana chakshuhu, he cannot know Brahman. Why? Because he has not been exposed to the pramana, which is the Shabdas of Vedanta. So either he has not been exposed to the Shabdas of Vedanta at all, or even if he has been exposed to the Shabdas of Vedanta, he may not have the qualifications to understand what it is saying. Including Shraddha, if he lacks Shraddha, he may even just outright reject what it is saying. And therefore, there are various reasons why one can be an Ajnana Chakshuhu. Either one has not been exposed to the pramana at all, or one has been exposed to the pramana but has rejected it, or cannot understand what it is saying. For all of these reasons, one remains an Ajnana Chakshuhu. Such an Ajnana Chakshuhu doesn't see this. So who is the loser here? We look at it. If a person refuses to use the eyes, let us say if a person doesn't have the eyes, there are two possibilities again. The person doesn't have the eyes, then he cannot see. Means he has not been exposed to the pramana at all. Or the person has the eyes, but he ties this scarf around his eyes. He blindfolds himself, like Gandhari. Dhritarashtra is the first example, who was not exposed to the pramana at all. But then Gandhari had the pramana but refused to use it. She tied this cloth around her eyes. So now, similarly, there may be a person who has not been exposed to Vedanta at all. Or there may be a person who has been exposed to Vedanta but has rejected the pramana. In either case, one remains spiritually blind. So that is the person has lost this valuable knowledge. The loss is one of moksha. Loss is the loss of freedom. Loss is the loss of the infinite. Ajnana chakshuhu na iksheta. We'll go to the next verse. Śravaṇādibhirruddīpta
श्रवणादिभिरुद्दीप्त
ज्ञानाग्निपरितापितः
ज्ञानाग्निपरितापितः
जीवः सर्वमलान्मुक्तः
जीवः सर्वमलान्मुक्तः
स्वर्णवत् द्योतते स्वयम्.
स्वर्णवद्योतते स्वयम्.
Here, Bhagavad is coming back to the topic of this Jnana Phalam. So we talked about the contrasting visions of the Jnani and the Ajñānī, and now Bhagavad is coming back to the topic of Jnana Phalam, the benefit of the knowledge. Bhagavad here says, Dyotate. So if we see that, Jiva in the second half of the shloka, Jiva sarvamalat muktaha swarnavat dyotate swayam. Bhagavad says dyotate. Dyotate means he shines. So who shines? Jiva. In the third quarter, first word, we have Jiva. Jiva dyotate, meaning this Jiva shines. And how does this Jiva shine? The last word of the last quarter is Swayam. Jiva Swayam dyotate, meaning shines by himself, meaning shines independently, without depending on anything else. Without depending on anything else, shines independently. Jiva Swayam dyotate. And what does this shining mean? What does he shine with? Does he begin to radiate light of some sort? Does he become radioactive in some way? Dyotate Swayam. So that is not the case. In this case, it is a figurative shining. So what does he shine with? He shines with pūrṇatvam. Shines with pūrṇatvam. His fullness, completeness, limitlessness. That is his very nature, and therefore, to shine with pūrṇatvam, he doesn't have to depend on anything else. Because that is his very nature. And then what kind of Jiva? So we said Jiva Swayam Dyotate. Swayam, he shines with this pūrṇatvam, independent of everything, without depending on everything. So what kind of Jiva? He says, Jiva sarvamalat muktaha. Swarnavat dyotate swayam. Jiva sarvamalat muktaha. Sarvamalat muktaha jiva swayam dyotate. Meaning that he is free of all impurities. Sarvamalat muktaha. So this is showing, this Bhagavad is teaching us that the Jiva is not getting anything new at all. He's just getting freed from all the impurities, that's all. That's all he has to do in order to reclaim his pūrṇatvam. He just has to be freed of all the impurities. And what are these impurities that he gets freed of? The first one is Ajñānam, impurity of Ajñānam. The second is Adhyāsa. As we have seen, whenever something is not known, it is invariably followed by a mistake. So I don't know my Brahman nature, and therefore it is invariably followed by a mistake that I take myself to be this limited body and mind. Ajñānam is the first impurity, the primal impurity, and then there is Adhyāsa, the superimposition. So now one mistakes oneself to be other than what one really is. So he's losing his shine. See, that's the example. And then now this person may come to a guru and he tries to listen to the Shastra. But then even after he listens, he doesn't understand. So there are some other impurities which are the lack of these qualifications. Lack of qualifications is the third impurity. And the lack of qualifications itself, we have looked at it, right? It can be divided into malaha, or malam, and vikshepaha. The malaha is basically all of these ragas and dveshas that are constantly dragging him into the world, engaging him in something or the other related to the world, pursuit of the world, worldly pursuits. So this is the malaha. And vikshepaha is all of the turbulence of the mind, jumping from one thing to another, lack of the single pointedness of the mind. All of these are the impurities. So now let us say he gains the qualification, he removes the mala and vikshepa. And then he gains the qualifications. And then he does the Śravaṇam, and now he also gains the jnana. But then the jnanam is not jnanam that is free of doubts. He has, which is not really jnanam at all. Doubtful knowledge is not real knowledge at all. So this doubtful knowledge also is no good. The samshayaha is yet another impurity. And then let us say he has managed to remove his doubts also. But then there can be these contrary habitual thinking patterns. Habitual thinking patterns. Or habitual responses to situations. This is the viparita bhavana, viparyaya. This is also an impurity. So the Jnānī who has come to abide in this knowledge, he has dealt with all of these impurities. Sarva malat muktaha. He has freed himself of all of these impurities. And how? How does he free himself with all of these impurities? He says, Uddipta Jnānāgni Paritapitaha. Uddipta Jnānāgni Paritapitaha. In the first line, he says, Śravaṇādibhihi Uddipta Jnānāgni Paritapitaha. So, Uddipta Jnānāgni Paritapitaha. Paritapitaha means purified. Shodhitaha, purified. Purified by what? Jnānāgnihi, the fire of knowledge. What kind of fire of knowledge? That has been kindled, uddipta. Fire of knowledge that has been fanned and kindled. Kindled and fanned. So, by this fire of knowledge that has been kindled and fanned and sustained, he has been purified. So how was this fire kindled? He says, Śravaṇādibhihi, by Śravaṇam, etc. He uses Adipada, Śravaṇam, etc. So what does Śravaṇam, etc. mean? Śravaṇam, first of all, Śravaṇam, which is consistent and systematic study of Vedanta for a length of time. Śravaṇam. And through Śravaṇam, he tries to remove this Ajñānam and Adhyasa, the impurities of Ajñānam and Adhyasa. And then he has to do Mananam, where he removes these doubts, the impurity called Samshayaha. And then he follows that with Nididhyāsanam, which is, like we saw, marinating the mind in the brine of this knowledge. Through that, he removes these, he weakens the contrary habitual tendencies. So he removes this viparita bhavana, weakens all of this viparita bhavana, Jiva bhava durbalikaranam, Brahma bhava prabalikaranam. So through Śravaṇādibhihi, through Śravaṇam, Mananam and Nididhyāsanam. And even before coming to Śravaṇam, it implies that he has gained the qualification. He has dealt with mala and vikshepa. How did he deal with mala? Through karma yoga. How did he deal with vikshepa? Through upasana yoga. So through karma yoga, upasana yoga, Śravaṇam, Mananam, Nididhyāsanam, that is jnana yoga, he has become Sarva malat muktaha. He has become free of all these impurities. And Bhagavad gives a very nice example here that is very relatable in this context. He says, Swarnavat, like gold. So if we see gold intrinsically has the shine. It is a metal that inherently shines. But then what happens when we extract the gold? In nature, when we extract the gold, it is in the form of some kind of an ore. So in the ore, you don't see any of the shine at all. Why? Because it is mixed with a lot of other impurities. It is mixed with a lot of other sand or mud or other minerals, and all of these impurities are there. Mala is there. A lot of mala is there. So all of that has to be removed. So first, the grosser impurities have to be removed. Like one has to get rid of all of this dirt and mud, etc. That has to be done first, and then it gets somewhat purified. But then still you have to now remove the finer impurities, and the finer impurities and the finest impurities have to be removed. Finally, there's some process of electrolysis kind of thing that is done to separate the pure gold from the rest of it. That is the finest method of removing the finest impurity. But in between all of this, right? We say, and you can say even electrolysis is perhaps a modern way of doing it. In those days, in Bhagavad time, they did it with fire. So it was melted. It was melted, and the impurities were removed. Of course, after removing all the grosser impurities, it was melted in fire, and then finally this gold was removed. And then it becomes Sarva Malat Muktaha. And then what happens? Dyotate Swayam. When the impurities are removed, it shines by itself. It doesn't receive anything new in the process. It is only getting rid of things. That is what is more important. The shine is there in its by nature, it is shining. When all of these impurities are removed, it just gets back its shine that was obstructed by everything else. So similarly, the Jiva by nature is Brahman, which is of the nature, which has the shine of pūrṇatvam. That is the Jiva's nature. But then he finds himself to be apurnaha. Why? Because he has gotten mixed up with everything else. And then he gets purified by this fire of knowledge. And through knowledge, he understands that the Atma is Nitya Shuddha. Atma Nitya Shuddha, meaning it is impossible for the Atma, that is Brahman, to become impure through association with anything. Impossible, because it is Asanga Atma. It doesn't have a relationship with anything at all, because it belongs to a higher order of reality. For Atma Nitya Shuddha. Therefore, he then sees that it is impossible for me to become impure. That is in knowledge. This is the fire of knowledge that purifies him. And then when ignorance and all of these impurities go through this fire of knowledge, then he just reclaims his original pūrṇatvam. There is nothing new that is gained at all. He was Brahman, he is Brahman, and he will ever remain Brahman, that is ever Pūrṇaha, limitless, full and complete. We'll go to the next verse. Hridākāśodito hyātmā
हृदाकाशोदितो ह्यात्मा
bodhabhānustamo-pahrit
बोधभानुस्तमोपहृत्
sarvavyapi sarvadhari
सर्वव्यापी सर्वधारी
bhati bhāsayate-khilam.
भाति भासयतेऽखिलम्.
So Bhagavad is talking about the rise of knowledge here. And he says, Atma is Bodha Bhanuhu. Ātma Bodha Bhanuhu. The Atma is comparable to the sun. The sun is associated with all of this light that illumines everything. Similarly, Atma is of the nature of consciousness that illumines everything as we saw, because of pervasion of consciousness. So Atma by nature is of the nature of consciousness, the Swarupa Chaitanya. And what type of Atma is Bhagavad talking about here? He says, Hridakashodito hyatma. Hridakashoditaha hi Atma Bodha Bhanuhu. So Hridakashoditaha. Like the sun is Akashoditaha. The sun rises in the sky. Akashoditaha is really Akashe Uditaha. Rises in the sky. So similarly, Atma rises. Atma, here he's talking about Atma having risen in the Hridaya Kasha. In the intellect, the Atma rises. So what is this rise of the Atma? We say here it is the figurative rise of the Atma. The sun, of course, physically rises, but it is not that Atma physically rises in the intellect. Atma is always there. Atma was always there. Even when he was an Ajñānī, the same Atma was there. There is no change in Atma at all. And what has changed? Earlier the Ajñānam was there. And because of the Ajñānam, the real nature of the Atma was not understood. The Atma was misunderstood. The Atma was misunderstood to be this limited Jiva. And therefore, it is as though the Atma hasn't risen. But then after knowledge, one knows the real nature of the Atma. And therefore, the knowledge of the Atma has risen in the intellect, that is figuratively said, as Atma has risen in the Hridaya Kasha. So what changes is that just as the night goes, when the darkness of the night goes, then the sun rises. Similarly, when this darkness, the night of this ignorance goes, then the sun of Atma as though rises in the intellect. So Hridakashoditaha Ātmā Bodha Bhanuhu. Atma is the sun of consciousness, the sunlike consciousness that rises in the space of the heart, rises in the intellect. Hridakashoditaha Ātmā Bodha Bhanuhu. And what kind of Atma is it? The last quarter, in the last part of the second quarter, Bhagavad says, Bodha Bhanuhu Tamopahrit. So Tamaha Apahrit, that's what it means. Tamaha Apahrit or Tamopahrit. So this refers to the Atma as the destroyer of this darkness, or the destroyer of this ignorance, Tamopahrita. So again we say that this is also figurative because Atma itself doesn't directly destroy the ignorance. As we have seen, Atma in fact supports the ignorance and the effects of the ignorance, because the I am is there. And then one says, I am apurnaha, because of ignorance. So the apurṇatvam itself is also supported by the Atma. Just like the rope is not opposed to rope ignorance of the snake. The rope itself is not opposed to the rope ignorance or the snake, because the snake exists along with the rope in his vision. If the rope was opposed to the snake, the rope would have destroyed the snake as soon as the snake arises. The rope is not opposed to the snake or the snake ignorance. What is opposed to the snake is rope knowledge. Ajñānam alone is opposed to the snake and to the rope ignorance. So similarly, here Atma coexists with the ignorance. In fact, Atma supports the ignorance and also the adhyasa. Because Atma is the adhisthana. Just like the rope supports the rope ignorance as well as the snake. Atma supports Atma Ajñānam as well as the adhyasa of apurnat. Atma is the adhisthana. So then what is tamopahrit really speaking? It is Atma Jnanam is the tamopahrit. It is the aham brahmasmi jnanam that destroys this darkness of ignorance and it reveals the real Brahman nature of the Atma. So in the presence of the Atma, when the aham brahmasmi vritti rises in the mind, in the presence of the Atma, that aham brahmasmi vritti destroys the ignorance. So just like the sun itself, if you keep a dry leaf in presence of the sun, then the sun itself doesn't burn the dry leaf. But if you bring a magnifying lens and place it between the sun and the dry leaf, then when the rays of the sun are concentrated through the magnifying lens, then that ends up burning the dry leaf. Similarly, so in the presence of the sun, the lens destroys the dry leaf. Similarly, in the presence of the Atma, the Aham Brahmasmi Vrittihi destroys the Atma Ajnanam. So it is Tamopahrita. And then once the ignorance goes, how is the Atma known? How is the Atma seen? Once the ignorance goes, then the Atma is seen as being Sarva Vyapi. Earlier he said, I am small pervading. But after the self misconception in the SM in the small goes, he says, I am all pervading, Sarva Vyapi. And Sarvadhari, he understands the Atma to be the Adhishthanam. As Brahman, the Atma is the Adhishthanam of the Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara. Therefore, it is the Adhishthanam of everything, Sarvadhari. And Bhati, the Atma, shines independently, is self-revealing. And Bhasayate Akhilam, it reveals everything else. Sarva Vyapi, Sarvadhari, Bhati, Bhasayate Akhilam. We'll go to the next verse, which is the last verse of Ātma Bodha. And this verse is in a slightly different meter. Digdeshakaladyanapekshya sarvagam.
Digdeshakaladyanapekshya sarvagam.
Shitadihrin nitya sukham niranjanam.
Shitadihirnitya sukham niranjanam.
Yasvatma tirtham bhajate vinishkriyaha.
Yasvatma tirtham bhajate vinishkriyaha.
Sasarvavit sarvagato mrito bhavet.
Sasarvavit sarvagato mrito bhavet.
So here, Bhagavad is giving the phalashruti. Typically, if you have a series of a stotram, then in the end of the stotram there is a phalashruti that talks about the one who recites that stotra, what phalam does he gain, and so on. So similarly here he is giving the phalashruti for Ātma Bodha. The one who studies the Ātma Bodha and does the Śravaṇam, Mananam, Nididhyāsanam, etc. What phalam does he gain? He's talking about that. So here Bhagavad is giving a very creative analogy here. And he takes the example of a person, a pilgrim, for example, who is wandering in a desert. A person who is wandering in a desert, and then he has been wandering for a very long time in the desert, and now he is thirsty. He's very thirsty and tired, so he's looking for water. And wherever he looks, he sees this desert, but occasionally he sees a pool of water, and so he runs towards it. And then what does he find? He finds that it is not there really. So that frustrates him even more. He's very tired and thirsty already, and now he's running after mirages. So he has been roaming around in this desert for a very long time, very frustrated. And now imagine that he now really comes across a sacred pool of water. So it is not just a normal pool of water, but it's even a sacred pool of water. Now, what will his joy be? So he can take a dip in it. He can drink it. So it rejuvenates him, right? Removes his thirst, removes his tiredness, and also being sacred, it actually removes his papa also. So he is getting manifold benefits through this tirtha. He comes across this tirtha. This is what we call a pilgrimage spot or a tirtha. So similarly, now this is the example. Now, if we come to what Bhagavad-pada is talking about here, is that the Jiva is like this tired pilgrim who has been wandering about in this desert of samsara. And he is very, very tired and thirsty in the sense that he is thirsty for this pūrṇatvam, for this fulfillment. He is searching, he is looking for this fulfillment everywhere. And once in a while he sees something in this samsara, in this world, that he thinks is going to make him fulfilled, and he runs after that, only to find that it is not giving him the fulfillment that he is seeking. And so he's constantly been running after things in the world and not finding the fulfillment that he's seeking. But then he now comes to Vedanta. Through Śravaṇam, Mananam, and Nididhyāsanam, he discovers this Tirtha, that is his own Ātmā. He discovers this Ātmā, that is the Tirtha, the ultimate Tirtha, that removes his search for pūrṇatvam, that removes this entire struggle in samsara. So that is what Bhagavad-pada is talking about here. So we look at the verse. So in the second half, he says, Yas Svatma Tirtham bhajate vinishkriyaha. Bhajate means he enjoys, he says. Who enjoys? Yaha vinishkriyaha bhajate. So yaha vinishkriyaha, Yas Svatma Tirtham bhajate vinishkriyaha. We are slightly rearranging it to say, Yaha vinishkriyaha bhajate. Meaning that one who is vinishkriyaha, he enjoys, he says. Vinishkriyaha, what does vinishkriyaha mean? Means one who has given up running after the various materialistic pursuits, or for the various running after the first three purusharthas, basically, artha, kama, and dharma, for the sake of artha and kama. Why has he stopped running after this? Because he has discovered that they cannot give me the nitya sukham, they can only give me this anitya sukham. And therefore he has gained vairagyam, basically. And then, having gained vairagyam, he has also gained this jnanam. There is another meaning for vinishkriyaha, which means he has discovered the Atma that is akarta, that is not the karta at all, that is never a doer. Because the Atma is changeless. Being changeless and being asangaha, it is never the doer. It is just the witness, the witness of the body, mind, etc. that are engaging in various activities. The Atma itself is never the doer. He has discovered that the Atma, as the Atma, I am akarta. So he has discovered that I myself am this vinishkriyaha, yaha vinishkriyaha. He enjoys, he says. So due to Jnanam and Vairagyam, he has discovered that I am the Akarta Atma. And such a person enjoys Ajate. And what does he enjoy? Svatma Tirtham. He enjoys this Tirtha, this the sacred dip, so to say, in the Atma, in himself. He enjoys himself by figuratively taking a dip in his own Atma, which is the ultimate Tirtha. And having done what does he enjoy himself? Digdesha kaladi anapekshya. Digdesha kaladi anapekshya. Meaning that he doesn't have to give any special consideration for this direction, space, time, etc. See, if you take any other tirtha in this world, for example, there's all this Pushkaram and Kumbha Mela and Mahakumbha, etc. So in all of this, there is a particular tirtha that you have to go to, a sacred spot. So you cannot be Digdesha Kaladi Anapeksha. Meaning you have to take into account the direction, the space, time, etc. So if you are going to the Pushkaram, some Pushkaram, then you have to go in that direction, towards that. Or if you are going to Kumbha Mela, you have to go towards Prayagraj. And that too, you have to take into account that particular place. You have to go to the right spot. And at the right time, Digdesha Kaladi Apeksha. You have to be Digdesha Kaladi Apeksha, not Anapeksha. So you have to go to the right place at the right time and then take the dip. Then only it gives you that phalam. So in case of the Kumbh Mela, for example, the planets have to arrive and have to come into a particular configuration, which happens once in 12 years. In case of the Mahakumbh Mela, for example, it happens once in 144 years, the planets come into that configuration. So one has to be aware of all this and go to that Tirtha. But in case of this Ātma Tirtha, there is no consideration for direction, space, or time. Why? Because Atma is all-pervading. It is here and now as this very I. It is available for me as this very I, here and now. So there is no consideration for space, place, time, or direction. In fact, wherever I go, I am here and now. Whenever I go, I am here and now. So wherever I go, whenever I go, I am always there, here and now. Whichever direction I face, I am there, here and now. And therefore, they digdesha kaladi anapeksha. One can take a dip in this Atma Tirtham. And how does one take a dip? By knowing that I am Brahman. That is the end of it. Knowing that I am Brahman. This Atma becomes a Tirtha because it is Brahman. That doesn't have any limitation at all. It's full, limitless and complete. Always. It is full, limitless and complete. And therefore, just by invoking the knowledge that I am Brahman in Nididhyāsanam, I can take a dip in this Atma Tirtha and enjoy the reflected, experienced Atmananda. I can revel in this knowledge that I am Brahman in Nididhyāsanam. And therefore, that's why we say there is no rules for Nididhyāsanam. One can lie down in bed and take a dip in the Atma Tirtha. The Digdesha Kaladi Anapeksha. Sarvagam is all pervading. All other tirthas are small pervading. I have to go to that place and take a dip. That's a small pervading tirtha. But Atma is all pervading. And Nitya Sukham, as he says, in the first line, Digdesha Kaladi Anapekshya Sarvagam Shitadi Hrin Nitya Sukham. With every other tirtha, what one gets is one feels rejuvenated, one feels one can quench one's thirst there. One feels rejuvenated, and one also gains some punya from that. But then, as we have seen, even dharma, punya is shine punya martya lokam vishanti. So even punya is subject to kshaya. Means the punya also has an end of life. The punya gives its result, but then subsequently the punya also perishes. And therefore, it cannot give me the nitya sukha. Whereas this Atma Tirtham is Sarvagam, it is all-pervading. So we are contrasting the Atma Tirtham with every other Tirtha. The Atma Tirtham is Sarvagam, it is all-pervading. Wherever I go, it is there. Whenever I go, it is there. In whichever direction I see, it is there. And it gives me this Nitya Sukham. Nitya Sukham, its very nature is Nitya Sukham. By nature. And Shitadi Hrit. So when we go and take a dip in any of the other tirthas, especially in the north, right, one begins to shiver. And shivering, one takes a dip. So there is Shita. There's Shita when one takes a dip. But here in the Atma Tirtha, there is no such Shita, etc. So Shitadi Hrit. Shitoshna, Sukha Dukha, not just Shitoshna. Shitoshna Hrit means there is no heat, no cold, etc. because it takes one beyond the duality of heat and cold. And not just beyond the duality of heat and cold, it takes you beyond the duality of Sukha and Dukkha. All this states of mind, which is happiness and sorrow, it transcends all of that. And then even mana, apamana, all of these dualities of praise and censure, heat and cold, pleasure and pain, all of these dualities are transcended when one takes a dip in the Atma Tirtha, which is understanding, having understood my own real nature as Brahman. That is what the dip is. And Niranjanam. So in some of the other tirthas, we have to look for a clean spot to take the dip. Because as we know, for example, even in the Ganga, etc., we have to even in the ghats, we have to go to the right ghat and take a dip in the right place. But then Atma is Niranjanam, meaning that it is ever pure, ever pure. There is no question of even a wee bit of impurity in the Atma, because it is inherently free of every impurity belonging to a higher order of reality. And therefore, Niranjana. So Bhagavad-pada contrasts the Atma Tirtha with every other Tirtha. And then Bhagavad-pada says, the one who takes this dip in the Atma Tirtham, having understood that I am Brahman, he says, Sa Bhavet. So if we see towards the end of the second quarter, or towards the end of the second half, he says, Sa Sarvavit Sarvagato Mrito Bhavet. So if we split that, it becomes Sa Sarvavit Sarvagataha Amritaha Bhavet. So Sa Bhavet meaning he becomes. He becomes what? Sarvavit. Sarvam Vetti iti Sarvavit. So he as well knows everything. Yasmin Vijñāte Sarvam Idam Vijñātam Bhavati. He knows, having known this ultimate material cause, he as well knows everything else. So, Sarvavit Bhavet, Sarvagataha Bhavet, he becomes all-pervading as Brahman. And Amritaha Bhavet, meaning as Brahman, he has no space-wise limitation, and therefore Sarvagataha Bhavet, as Brahman, he has no time-wise limitation. So, Amritaha Bhavet, he becomes immortal, imperishable. So this brings us to the end of the last shloka, and with this we have completed the Ātma Bodha. And in general, whenever we complete a text, we go back and recite the first shloka again in order to show our own commitment, in order to bring out our own commitment that we are committed to the repeated study of this text. And therefore, we will go back and recite the first shloka. So Shardaji, you can also, in fact, you can start with the first shloka, and you can recite the first shloka.
तपोभिक्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्षोऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते.
तपोभिः क्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्षोऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते. So with this we have completed the text, and we will have one more class, and we will see whether it will be next week or the week after that, where we will summarize the entire text. Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.